Hello. I am getting comfy here for our live session of Pranayama and meditation. Um, if you're joining me and you haven't already done so, get comfortable. So find some kind of apparatus to sit on so that you can comfortably practice pranayama and meditation after a brief little chat. Just going to check that this is streaming live. Everything's going well. There we go. Okay, great. So I wonder how many of you have, in moments of stress, in challenging times, somehow realized later on that you just completely forgot to use the skills that you have, the skills that you as a teacher, if you're already a teacher, that you teach others. I know that for me, this happens all the time. I will occasionally go through periods of waking up in the middle of the night and I can't get back to sleep. And, the next day, it'll just pop into my mind. I'll think, why didn't I do some breathing practice? Why didn't I do meditation? Sometimes I remember to, sometimes I don't. In times of grief, in times of anger, in times of anxiety, I will often completely forget that I have these tools that I teach others and that I can also use myself. So today, I thought I would share with you, I thought we would practice some of the pranayama we already know, and also that I might share one or two variations on pranayama with you that you may or may not be familiar with. And we'll practice, do a few pranayama practices, and then we'll finish with a few minutes of meditation so that we can just kind of sit and feel the effects of our pranayama practice. So let's begin by practicing, we'll practice Vishmavritti, and then we'll try practicing a breath called, it's referred to as 4-7-8. And we might practice box breath, where we hold the breath after the inhalation and after the exhalation. Then we'll move into Brahmari and then meditation. So if you haven't already done so, find a comfortable seated pose in which you can practice pranayama meditation. So let's get comfortable. You could take Gyan Mudra, or you could just let the palms rest, palms up or palms down, as you prefer. And then when you're ready, you can close your eyes, or you can let the eyes be slightly open so that you're kind of looking through the eyelashes, whichever you prefer. And find a drishti, or gaze point. So if your eyes are closed, that drishti is on the backs of your eyelids. And you might imagine it as a point between the two eyes, your drishti, if the eyes are closed. I suggest always beginning by noticing the breath as it is before practicing any kind of pranayama, so that we're allowing the body to relax and allowing our awareness to blossom a little bit before we impose a different way of breathing. So become aware of your breath exactly as it is. Allow the shoulders and shoulder blades to slide down. And you might put the front edge of your tongue just sort of comfortably against the roof of your mouth, just behind the upper teeth. So kind of between or against the back of the upper teeth and the roof of the mouth, right at the jaw. Noticing the breath as it is. So we'll very gradually begin to shift into a Vishamavritti practice. Vishamavritti practice is one with a shorter inhalation and a longer exhalation. Anytime we use a longer exhalation, the breath practice tends to be calming. So for anxiety, for anger, these can be helpful for restlessness, for insomnia. This is probably the kind of breathing practice you want to lean on, at least first, is one with a longer exhalation. So let's begin to very gradually invite a longer exhalation. We're not going to count just yet. I'm not going to count it out just yet. But see if you can begin to lengthen the exhalation a little bit so that it's longer than the inhalation. And now what you might do is just count with your fingers. So you can count your own inhalation length and your own exhalation length. I don't want to impose a specific length of inhalation and exhalation because everybody breathes at quite a different pace. So I'll count my inhalation and exhalation out loud just to let you know what I mean by counting it out. And I'll show my hand up here just so it's really obvious, but normally I would do this with my hand on my thigh. But you don't have to breathe at the same pace as me. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Inhale, 2, 3. And so you're just counting in your own head. So really, you're not forcing your breath to accommodate your count. You're counting just to note that the exhalation is longer than the inhalation. No forcing. Some people use the fingers and they go back and forth, all the way to pinky, and then all the way back again. They might use the end one twice, once for the inhalation and once for the exhalation when they start it. It's really up to you. It's just about keeping track for yourself. So notice, just for your own information, how many more counts is your exhalation than your inhalation? How much longer is your exhalation than your inhalation right now? So a note that the difference between the length of inhalation and length of exhalation that feels good for you might be different from what feels good for another person. Let's just compare to me, because I'm the only one you can hear. So I'll show you what my inhalation and exhalation look like after a couple of minutes doing this practice. So I'll tap with my hand with my one hand for the inhalation, and then I'll change to my other hand for the exhalation, so that I don't have to speak, so that I can do a genuine inhalation and exhalation. Yeah, so mine changed really quickly. I went from 5 count on inhalation, 8 count on exhalation. On the next inhalation, after I had a chance to calm down a bit from talking, I was inhaling to a count of 10 comfortably, and then exhaling for longer. So what I really want to illustrate by this is that it would be great to come up with creative ways of teaching Vishwamritti in your classes, so that your students have the opportunity to breathe at a pace that works for them, rather than being forced into an arbitrary count that somebody somewhere made up. And the other thing to note is that someone might be counting like this very quick, and then their count is going to be longer, and someone might be counting like this, right? So I think ideally it's once in a while it can be helpful, I think, for some students to have an arbitrary count. But even if you start with that, just to show them how, then you might say, okay, start with a 5 inhalation and a 7 exhalation, and then go from there and find the pace that works for you. As long as the exhalation is longer than the inhalation, you are practicing Vishwamritti. So again, it's about a ratio, right? It's not actually about a length of time. Someone might say, well, I am doing 5 in and 8 out, but they're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then someone else is counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So their breaths are a lot shorter. So let's just remember that we can be doing the same count, but counting more quickly or more slowly. And so encourage your students to find what works for them, rather than counting it out and saying, stick to this. Because I don't know if you've had the experience, but I've frequently had the experience that the teacher's count is far too fast for me. I have quite long inhalations and very, very long exhalations. So consider the way that you're teaching these breaths as well. So that's a little review of Vishwamritti. There's a pretty popular breathing practice, and probably originally comes from yoga, because there are so many variations that we don't even know, I'm sure, that real actual yogis were practicing for thousands of years. But it's the 4-7-8, and it's been popularized by a naturopathic doctor, I think, and then some studies were done on it, or at least one study, I think. And it is proposed to be good for many things, as many pranayama are. Basically, a pranayama can be calming, or it can be invigorating or stimulating. And so, as I said earlier, when we exhale for longer than we inhale, usually it's calming. When we inhale for longer than we exhale, or we go quickly, then that's probably going to be more stimulating. So let's try the 4-7-8. Now again, my 4 might be really slow, and my 7 will be the long, like I'll do 7 counts at that same pace to hold the breath. So inhale 4, hold 7, exhale 8. So it's a ratio. That means that your count might be a lot faster, or even a bit faster or a bit slower, but the ratio of inhalation to retention to exhalation will be the same for you. So again, that's why I keep repeating that maybe counting it out for your students isn't going to support them in having a pace of breath that works for them. It's really the ratio that's important. So for demonstration purposes, I'll do it once sort of out loud, and then you find your own pace. For retaining the breath, for this one, the 4-7-8, you want to use Mulabandha. Because we're retaining the breath, which is to say holding the breath, after the inhalation, we don't, it's not that we can't use Uddiyana Bandha, but you will have had to not breathe into the belly if you're going to use Uddiyana Bandha. And so generally, if I'm going to use Uddiyana Bandha on a breath retention that follows inhalation, I would usually teach Ujjayi breath first, have the students practice breathing into the upper chambers, and then I would use Uddiyana Bandha and Mula Bandha for the breath retention. But for this one, I'm going to suggest breathing right down into the belly, and then just using a little bit of Mula Bandha to support the holding of the breath after the inhalation, and a little bit of Jalandhara Bandha, which happens when we just sort of sit with the base of the skull over the back of the heart, and then we'll exhale. So 4-7-8, and I'll show you once, and I'll change hands when I'm changing my activity. So it'll be 4 with one hand to inhale, 7 with the other to retain, and then 8 with the other to exhale. And when I retain, I'll be using Mula Bandha. You can count on your fingers if that helps, or you can just count in your head. Let's try a few rounds. 4-7-8. Inhale 4, retain for 7 with Mula Bandha support. Exhale 8. Begin again with inhale for 4. Let's try a few rounds on your own. So just take note of how this is feeling for you. I probably generally teach pranayama only after a minimum of at least 5 or 6 minutes of sort of relaxation, centering, and grounding practice in a class. Like the earliest I would probably teach a pranayama would be, like I said, 5 or 6 minutes into class, if those 5 or 6 minutes were spent on grounding, centering, and stillness. The exception might be Ujjayi breath, but anything where you're controlling the length of time or using retention of breath, either after inhalation or after exhalation, I would suggest giving your students a good amount of time to calm the nervous system, and to notice their natural breathing, or however they're breathing at the time, for a little while before asking them to control it. I found in my experience that pranayama is not always a helpful practice for everyone at all times. I know that I've had a number of students over the years. I wouldn't say it's rare, although it's definitely a minority of times that it happens. But many students have expressed that controlling their breath in any way or closing a nostril makes them feel more anxious. So that's something to note, and it's helpful to always invite your students to try the breath, and if it makes them feel more anxious or uncomfortable in any way, as well as other things like lightheaded, that they can just go back to whatever breathing pattern is naturally there and just observe that. So try to remember to always invite your students to let go of the pranayama practice if it is not supporting them in feeling less anxious, and in fact is causing more anxiety. So I'd like to finish with Brahmari Pranayama because it's one of my favorites. And I thought we could practice 7 breaths. If you're not at that point in the training yet and you don't know Brahmari Pranayama, I'll do a demonstration first. Then we'll do 7 breaths, 7 rounds, 7 breaths. And then we'll finish with just meditation until 10:30, which will probably just be a few minutes of meditation. So Brahmari Pranayama, I find, is a really balanced breathing practice because my experience of it is that it is always calming mentally, but it's also quietly, gently invigorating. So I feel more aware of all of the stimuli coming in through my senses after practicing Brahmari Pranayama, but I feel like my thoughts are more calm, more quiet. So do feel free to try it with me and find out for yourself how it feels for you, because that won't necessarily be your experience, but I do find a lot of people do feel that way. So demonstration, in case you're not familiar with it, these middle and ring fingers go over the eyelids, index fingers on the forehead, pinky fingers on the cheekbones, and the thumb goes on the tragus, this little flap of the ear, but it's actually going to go here and sort of press the ear back. So I'm pressing back rather than sticking my thumb on the tragus and pushing it into my ear. I'm sliding it back from the back of the cheekbone. So you're going to close the ears once you're ready to practice. The rest of it is, once you have all this in place, you close the ears, then you do a nice long inhalation. I won't demonstrate that because you know how to inhale. Sometimes I use ujjayi breath, so little constriction in the throat. And the exhalation is a humming sound for the duration of the exhalation. And the humming, we want it to be in our upper register rather than doing like the lowest. We do a higher, sometimes called bee's breath. So actually, I think you get it, and we can start our 7 rounds together and then just have a couple minutes of meditation. Everyone will finish at a different time. I think I'll probably be last, but some of you might have a longer breath and might finish after me too. In a classroom, I usually assure students that I won't stop humming or doing the breath until everyone is done. And that way no one feels shy about being the last person in the room humming while everyone else is silent. So let's give it a try. See if you can let the shoulder blades slide down the back and the shoulders relax. Back of the heart over the tail, base of the skull over the back of the heart. Let the elbows point down so that the shoulders are relaxed. And then closing the ear flaps when you're ready by sliding the tragus back into the ear. 7 breaths. Notice how you feel. What is the quality of sound that you're noticing through your hearing sense? What is the quality of light through closed eyelids or open eyes? What do you notice on the skin? You feel the temperature or air movement across the skin. It's the quality of the mind. It's 10:30, so if you have to go, thank you for joining. I'll just say a few final words. My experience of Dramati today was that I actually felt quite hungry for breath. This isn't something that's happened to me very often. And it was interesting. I found myself stopping the humming because the humming forces us to exhale very slowly. I found myself stopping the humming and letting the rest of the exhalation go out so that I could inhale again sooner, because I was feeling a little bit anxious, a little bit hungry for breath. I also found with the 4-7-8 that because I was talking and then I tried the practice before I gave myself time to settle into an easy, natural breath, that again, it felt a little bit arduous, a little bit like work, and just, it didn't feel as calming as I think it might have if I'd had some time to settle into it. So I just want to reinforce that pranayama doesn't always have a positive effect on relieving anxiety. And not every practice will work for everyone at every time. Brahmari, for example, we just did 7 breaths. And if you're going to teach it to beginners, I would start with just doing maybe 3 breaths for beginners and then adding a breath each time you teach the same group, or advising that person or those people to add a breath after they've practiced doing just a few breaths to start for a while. Because doing pranayama, the practices do just by default force a controlling of the breath. They don't always have a net positive effect. So again, we can use pranayama, but like anything, it requires skill and practice, experimentation, awareness, curiosity, and a willingness to continue to learn. And there isn't just one way. There's a lot of variations. So keep experimenting and exploring. And if you have any questions about any of the pranayama that we practiced today, feel free to put them in the comments. Just tag me, please. And I'll answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you for joining me.